Hello all, it's Keith doing the weekly kind of update as to what we've covered in session, and if you miss a session you could always catch up with these videos. This week we're just going to have a look at a couple of things. Well, in this particular video we're going to look at more control over the position of objects in the window. So we've got Maya open and we're going to start manipulating things. So last week we learned how to position and create objects. So we've got a cube there. Use the Alt key to rotate around. Use the middle mouse button pushed in to pan, and we use the right mouse button to zoom in and out. We can also use the W key to move the objects around in 3D, the E key to rotate, and the R key to scale. Okay, now what we're going to focus on is the side panel over here. You'll notice whenever we create any kind of objects, the side panel will pop up and we should have the attribute editor. The attribute editor shows the name of the object. So if I click between these two objects, you'll see P-cube shape 1, P-cube shape 2. If I delete it and then I create another one, you'll see P-cube shape 2, create cylinder, P cylinder shape 1. So it's just giving an automatic name. So we're going to just go through some of these tabs at the top here. The first tab we are going to look at later. So this Lambert, that's basically the name of the type of material that's been applied to it. The default setting for the color of objects as you create them is a Lambert, and it's a mid kind of grey color. It is possible to change the color of it, but we're not going to do it in this session. We could change the transparency and things like that, but we don't need to. We're not going to focus on this one. A couple sessions down the line we're going to start manipulating the different colors and the textures and how shiny something is, but at the moment we're ignoring that. But this is just where, when you've actually got the object, this is where the color is actually stored. Okay, we're not going to deal with the initial shading group. We don't need to worry about that. We're going to go straight to Polycube 2 here, and that's because it's the name of the object. You'll see Polycube 1, Polycube 2. Doesn't really matter. The middle tab here, we'll notice a few attributes. The attribute, because we're in the attribute editor, we need to make sure this tab is open, and it'll tell us the width, the height, and the depth of the object. If I wanted to make a perfect cube, I could actually highlight that and say 5, height 5, depth 5. So I've made a perfect cube. I can rotate around that. You'll notice because it's slightly smaller than the cube with the cube that you actually created, it's actually now hovering because the origin of majority of the primitives is actually from the center. So if we wanted to, because we've set this width 5, height 5, depth 5, we want to move it. Now we could just move it and see if we could approximate where we wanted to put it. We don't necessarily know exactly where it is because that's position, that's a particular height. We don't necessarily know where it is relative to the 3D space. We zoom in and out, we can see the whole lot. But we can go and have a look. We go P-cube 2 and we can see the physical position of the cube in 3D space. Now translate, that's like the y-axis in the middle. That is the height from the floor. Now I got it nearly right. If the cube is 5 by 5, halfway up the cube will be 2.5. So I'll change that to 2.5 and that will be perfectly on the floor. Now if I move or delete this, I'll move this, I'll go back to the position of the polycube. If I move this to 0, I move that to 0, you can see the position of the cube changing. Now it's still, the height y is at 2.5. That's the x-axis, that's the y-axis, that's the z-axis. And you can see the 3 axes, and you can see the little 3 axes in the corner. So blue there, if I wanted to move it maybe 2.5 in the z-axis, I could put 2.5. So it's moved it forward. if I put negative 2.5, it'll move along the z-axis into the negative region. This side of the z-axis is negative, this side is positive. And you can tell the difference because the z-axis where it's pointing out, that's plus. The x-axis, that's plus over here. The y-axis is plus above the ground. Now we can get mixed up sometimes and turn things upside down, but you'll always see the direction of the arrows. So I'm going to move this back to the middle. So 0, 0, 2.5. If I went to the polycube and I change that to maybe the width is 10 by 10 by 10, it'll be off the floor again. So if I wanted to make sure that's flat on the floor, I change that to half the height, which is 5. Now that's in the middle. Now if I create a sphere next to it, I've got a sphere here. Now what the plan is to put that sphere on top of that cube. So we can actually control, at the moment you can see the position of the sphere, 9.6 minus 9.9, whatever. I'm just going to move this relative, so 10, move that up 10. I'm going to put that on 0, 0. You notice that the 0, 0 is actually where these black lines cross. Obviously the height is wrong, but we double check the diameter. I'm going to set the radius as 5 because the cube is 10, so we can imagine that the half of the cube is 5, so the sphere is actually going to be the same size as the cube. But if we want to place that on top, so the base of the sphere is on top of the cube, we need to change the relative position of the sphere. So polysphere, we can see this radius is 5. The position of the sphere in the y-axis is currently at 10. We know that's 10. We know the radius of that is also 5. So we still need to add another 5 to that to move it up and place it on top. Okay, so we know the cube is on the ground, the sphere is on top of the cube, and it's all in relative position. So if I put a cylinder, do the same with a cylinder. I'm going to make the polycylinder same radius as a sphere. I'm going to make the height 10. I'm going to move the cylinder onto 0, 0. Now, if I put 15, just to see, so we make sure, you see that's wrong. We know that's wrong, but it is in the middle. But we've got 10, middle of the cylinder. We know the height of the cylinder is 10, so it's 10 plus 5 and another 5. So put that on top. We need to put that at 20. We can put that on top. It looks like a hat at the moment. If we want it directly on top of that, we're putting it up another 5. And we get 25. So now we know the cube is on top of the ground, the sphere is on top of the cube, and the cylinder is on top of the sphere. That's the position in 3D space. The first tab is the spatial coordinates of the objects, depending on which ones they are. Cylinder shape, polycylinder. We don't need to worry too much about the cylinder shape. The polycylinder is the radius. Say double the radius. We get 10. But we haven't changed the height, so we know the height's always going to be the same. Okay, so we made a nice lampshade there. This is all we want to cover in this session. And also as well, this is good to know, you can actually expand this, but sometimes if it's too small, you'll see a little arrow next to that, and you can actually scroll along, particularly when we start dealing with colors. Okay, I'm just going to leave it there. So the first tab is the position in 3D space. The third tab are the parameters for the objects, and they're different depending on the type of object it is. So if I go to cube, the polycube, so it gives the height, depth, and width. For the sphere, it gives the radius. We'll talk about subdivisions later. And we have the polycylinder, we have the height and the radius. We'll change the radius to maybe 4 or 5, maybe 2. But we're not changing the height, so it's always going to be relative to the position. Okay, and that's it. Thank you very much. We'll see you later.